The Last Promise. A heartbreaking story of a man and his loyal dog. Chapter 1. The Rainy Night. The rain fell heavily over the small town of Willow Creek. Thunder growled in the dark sky while cold winds swept through the empty streets. Near the old railway station, a thin little puppy shivered under a broken wooden bench. People passed by without looking at him. Some kicked water toward him. Some ignored his cries. The puppy's fur was soaked, and his tiny body trembled from hunger and fear. He had not eaten for 2 days. Then, through the rain, a young man appeared. His name was Daniel Carter. Daniel was 28 years old, poor, lonely, and exhausted from life. He worked at a small construction site during the day and spent his nights in a tiny rented apartment. He had no family left. His parents had died years ago in a car accident. The woman he loved had left him because he was too poor. And every night, he returned home to silence. That night, Daniel stopped when he heard the puppy crying. The puppy looked at him with frightened eyes. Daniel slowly knelt down. "Hey, little guy." The puppy stepped back in fear. Daniel removed his jacket and gently wrapped it around the tiny dog. "You don't have anyone either, huh?" The puppy stared at him quietly. Daniel smiled sadly. "Come with me. I can't promise a good life, but I promise I'll never leave you alone." The puppy slowly walked into Daniel's arms. That was the beginning of a bond that would change both their lives forever. Chapter 2. A New Friend. Daniel named the puppy Max. Max was small, brown, and weak, but his eyes were full of love. Daniel bought milk and bread with the last money in his pocket. That night, while thunder shook the windows, Max slept beside Daniel for the first time. Daniel looked at the little dog sleeping peacefully and whispered, "I think we saved each other tonight." Days turned into weeks. Max followed Daniel everywhere. When Daniel woke up for work, Max waited near the door. When Daniel returned home tired and covered in dust, Max ran toward him happily. No matter how hard life became, Max always greeted him with love. For the first time in years, Daniel no longer felt alone. At night, Daniel spoke to Max like a best friend. "Today was hard, buddy." Max would place his head on Daniel's lap. "Sometimes I feel like life forgot about me." Max would quietly wag his tail. And somehow, Daniel always felt better afterward. Chapter 3. The Winter of Hunger. Winter arrived early that year. Snow covered the town. Work became scarce. Daniel lost his job. Days became darker. Food became expensive. Some nights Daniel went hungry so Max could eat. One freezing evening, Daniel sat beside the heater that barely worked. There was only one piece of bread left. Max pushed the bread toward Daniel with his nose. Daniel looked at him with tears in his eyes. "No, Max, you eat it." But Max refused. Daniel broke the bread into 2 pieces. They shared it together. That night Daniel cried silently. Not because he was hungry, but because a dog had shown him more loyalty and love than most humans ever had. Chapter 4. Sarah. One afternoon, Daniel met a woman named Sarah at a small bookstore. She was kind, gentle, and loved animals. When she saw Max sitting outside waiting for Daniel, she smiled. "He waits for you every day." Daniel nodded proudly. "Every single day." Sarah bent down and petted Max. "He really loves you." Daniel looked at Max. "He's all I have." Over time, Sarah became close to Daniel. For the first time in many years, Daniel felt hope again. The 3 of them spent evenings together in the park. Max would run happily while Sarah laughed. Daniel began dreaming of a better future. But happiness never stayed long in Daniel's life. Chapter 5. The Accident. One stormy night, Daniel worked late at a warehouse. Max waited outside as usual. Suddenly, loud brakes screamed through the street. A truck lost control on the slippery road. Daniel turned around just in time to see the truck racing toward him. Before Daniel could move, Max jumped. The dog pushed Daniel away. The truck struck Max instead. "Max!" Daniel's scream echoed through the rain. Max's small body rolled across the wet street. Daniel ran toward him, shaking. Blood mixed with rainwater. Max looked at Daniel weakly. His tail moved slowly, as if he was saying, "I saved you." Daniel carried him to the animal hospital. Doctors worked for hours. Sarah sat beside Daniel all night. Finally, the veterinarian came out. He survived, but his back leg is badly injured. Daniel cried with relief. Thank God. But life became even harder after that. Chapter 6. Broken Dreams. Medical bills piled up. Daniel worked multiple jobs to pay for Max's treatment. He barely slept. Sarah tried helping him, but stress slowly destroyed their relationship. One evening Sarah said softly, "Daniel, You can't keep sacrificing your entire life. Daniel looked at Max sleeping nearby. He saved my life. I owe him everything. Sarah sighed. And what about your future? Daniel remained silent. Months later, Sarah left town. Before leaving, she hugged Max and whispered, "Take care of him." Daniel watched her disappear from his life. Again, and once more, only Max stayed. Chapter 7, Years passing. Time moved quietly. Daniel grew older. Gray hairs appeared in his beard. Max also aged. His steps became slower. His eyes became cloudy, but his loyalty never changed. Every evening, Max still waited near the door. Every morning, he still followed Daniel. People in town admired their bond. Children often said, "Look, there's the man and his faithful dog." But nobody knew how deeply Daniel feared losing Max. Sometimes at night, Daniel watched Max sleeping, and silently cried, because he knew dogs never live long enough. Chapter 8, The Diagnosis. One cold morning, Max collapsed while walking. Daniel rushed him to the veterinarian. After several tests, the doctor's face became serious. "I'm sorry, Daniel. Max has cancer." Daniel felt the world stop. No, please no." The doctor lowered his eyes. "He may only have a few months left." Daniel sat beside Max and held his paw. Max looked at him calmly, as if he already understood. Daniel cried harder than he had cried in years. "You can't leave me too." Chapter 9, The Promise. From that day forward, Daniel devoted every moment to Max. They visited lakes, parks, forests, every place Max loved. Daniel cooked special meals for him, slept beside him, talked to him for hours. One night, under a sky filled with stars, Daniel whispered, "When my parents died, I thought I would never feel love again. Then you came into my life." Max rested his head on Daniel's chest. Daniel smiled through tears. "You gave me a reason to survive." The wind blew softly. Daniel hugged Max tightly. "I promise, you will never be alone. Not even at the end." Chapter 10, The Last Walk. Spring arrived. Flowers bloomed across Willow Creek. But Max could barely walk now. His body had become weak. One evening, Max slowly walked toward the park where he and Daniel had spent countless days together. Daniel walked beside him carefully. People smiled sadly as they passed. Everyone in town knew Max. And everyone knew the end was near. At the old oak tree, Max lay down. The sunset painted the sky orange. Daniel sat beside him. Tears streamed down his face. "Do you remember this place, buddy?" Max wagged his tail weakly. Daniel laughed softly through tears. "You were so small when I found you." Max stared at him lovingly. Daniel held him close. "Thank you for staying with me all these years." That night, Daniel carried Max home in his arms, like the night he first rescued him. Chapter 11, Goodbye. 3 days later, Max stopped eating. He barely moved. Daniel sat beside him all night. Rain tapped softly against the windows, just like the night they first met. Max looked at Daniel weakly. Daniel held his paw tightly. "It's okay, buddy. I'm here." Max slowly rested his head in Daniel's hand. Daniel whispered through tears, "I love you, Max." For a moment, Max's tail moved gently. Then, silence. Daniel froze. Max. No movement, no sound. The little heart that had loved him unconditionally for 13 years had finally stopped. Daniel broke down completely. He hugged Max's lifeless body and cried until sunrise. The apartment felt colder than ever before. Empty, silent, a silence so painful it felt unbearable. Chapter 12, The Grave Under the Tree. Daniel buried Max beneath the old oak tree in the park, the same place where they had spent their final evening together. People from town attended quietly. Some cried. Children placed flowers near the grave. Daniel carved words onto a small wooden sign. "Max, my best friend, my family, my hero." Every evening after work, Daniel visited the grave. He spoke to Max as if he were still there. "Today was hard again, buddy." Or, "I miss you so much." Sometimes he simply sat in silence, because silence was all he had left. Chapter 13, The Letter. One rainy evening, Daniel opened an old box filled with memories. Photos, dog toys, vet receipts, a broken leash, and a letter Sarah had written years earlier. It said, "Daniel, if you are reading this, I want you to know something important. I once thought you cared too much about your dog. But now I realize something beautiful. Max was not just your pet. He was the piece of your heart that kept you alive. Never feel ashamed for loving him deeply. Some humans spend their entire lives searching for the kind of loyalty you already had. Take care of yourself. And never forget that somewhere in this world, you were truly loved. Sarah. Daniel cried quietly while holding the letter. Outside, rain continued falling. Just like the night everything began. Chapter 14, Alone Again. Years passed. Daniel became an old man. His hair turned white, his hands trembled, but every morning, he still visited Max's grave. People often saw him sitting under the oak tree talking softly. Some thought he was lonely. Others thought he was crazy. But Daniel didn't care, because love like that never truly disappears. One winter morning, a small stray puppy appeared near Max's grave. The puppy looked cold and hungry. Daniel stared at him for a long time. The puppy slowly walked closer. Its eyes reminded Daniel of someone. He smiled sadly. You're alone too, huh? The puppy wagged its tail. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, he felt warmth again. He gently picked up the puppy and whispered, "Come home." Chapter 15, The Final Goodbye. Daniel named the puppy Charlie. Charlie brought life back into the old apartment. But Daniel's health continued to decline. One night, Daniel became very ill. He lay weakly in bed while Charlie stayed beside him. Daniel stroked the little dog's head. You know, there was another dog before you. Charlie looked at him quietly. Daniel smiled faintly. He saved my life. Outside the window, snow began falling. Daniel's breathing became slower. He closed his eyes. And for a moment, he imagined Max running toward him again. Young, healthy, happy. Daniel smiled. A single tear rolled down his cheek. I'm coming, buddy. The next morning, neighbors found Daniel peacefully gone. Charlie sat quietly beside the bed, waiting, just as Max once had. Epilogue. In Willow Creek, people still tell the story of the lonely man and his loyal dog. They say true love does not always come from humans. Sometimes it comes from a small animal that asks for nothing except your presence. Daniel never became rich, never became famous, but he experienced something many people never do. Unconditional love. And somewhere beyond this world, perhaps a loyal dog was running happily toward his best friend once again.